Hey everybody, let's continue on the story of Adolf Hitler, on where we stop on part 1, how the Nazi paramilitary group and strategic political alliances Hitler gradually gained influence. In 1933, he was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Within months, he consolidated his power, using the Reichstag fire and the Enabling Act to suppress opposition and eliminate civil liberties. By the time World War II began in 1939, Hitler was the absolute ruler of Germany. His policies of aggression and expansion led to the invasion of Poland and the start of the war. But as Germany faced increasing setbacks on the battlefield, Hitler's mental state began to deteriorate. In the final days of the war, with Soviet forces closing in on Berlin, Hitler married Eva Braun, his longtime companion, in a small ceremony in the Führerbunker. On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide together in the bunker, just as the world was witnessing the collapse of Nazi Germany. Their deaths marked the end of one of the most destructive regimes in history. The world would never forget the horrors of the Holocaust and the devastation caused by Adolf Hitler's ambitions. Over 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, were murdered during the Nazi regime. The impact of his actions continues to be felt today, with the scars of his reign serving as a constant reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the dangers of unchecked power. Once Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933, his next steps were focused on consolidating his power and implementing his radical agenda. The first major action was the Reichstag fire in February 1933. Using this event, Hitler manipulated public fear to push through the Reichstag fire decree, which suspended civil liberties and allowed the government to arrest political opponents. This gave Hitler the legal tools to eliminate his rivals and solidify his grip on power. Soon after, Hitler used the Enabling Act of 1933 to secure dictatorial powers. It effectively allowed him to pass laws without the consent of the Reichstag, German parliament, which meant that the democratic structure of the Weimar Republic was entirely dismantled. This marked the beginning of the Nazi regime's complete control over Germany. The Nazi Party turned Germany into a one-party state, with Hitler as its absolute leader. By 1934, Hitler had eliminated all major political opposition, including the once powerful SA, Sturmabteilung, and its leader, Ernst Röhm, whose increasing radicalism threatened Hitler's control. In what became known as the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler ordered the murder of Röhm and other rivals within the SA. This move further cemented his authority and eliminated any internal threats to his power. Alongside the political purge, Hitler focused on remilitarizing Germany and restoring its national pride. He defied the Treaty of Versailles by rebuilding the German military, reintroducing conscription in 1935, and occupying the Rhineland in 1936. These bold moves were met with little resistance from the international community, which emboldened Hitler. His aggressive foreign policies and expansionist ambitions were beginning to take shape. Hitler's ultimate goal was to establish a greater Germany and secure its dominance over Europe. His plans came to fruition in 1939 when he invaded Poland on September 1st. This invasion, carried out under the guise of reclaiming lost German territory, directly violated the Treaty of Versailles and led to the start of World War II. Britain and France, having promised to defend Poland, declared war on Germany shortly after the invasion. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war tactics that Hitler employed, were highly effective in the early stages of the war. Within weeks, Poland was divided between Germany and the Soviet Union, marking the beginning of a brutal conflict that would engulf the world. As Germany rapidly conquered much of Western Europe, including France in 1940, Hitler's vision of a European empire seemed within reach. As Hitler expanded German territory, he also enacted his most horrific and genocidal policies. From the moment the Nazis came to power, Jews and other minorities were subjected to systematic discrimination and persecution. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped Jews of their citizenship and rights, segregating them from the rest of society. But these early discriminatory measures were only a prelude to the horrors that would follow. In 1941, following the invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, The Nazis began the mass extermination of Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, political dissidents, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. This led to the creation of death camps including Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor, where millions of men, women, and children were killed in gas chambers, shootings, and other brutal methods. The Holocaust, one of the most horrific genocides in human history, led to the deaths of approximately 6 million Jews, along with millions of others. Hitler's obsession with a racially pure Aryan state motivated this unprecedented atrocity, which devastated entire communities and left a lasting legacy of suffering and loss. While Hitler's early successes were remarkable, the tide of the war began to turn against Germany as the Allies gained strength. The invasion of the Soviet Union, which began in June 1941, quickly turned into a disastrous campaign for Germany. The harsh Russian winter, combined with fierce Soviet resistance, led to significant German losses, especially at the Battle of Stalingrad, 1942-1943. This defeat marked the beginning of a long retreat for German forces on the Eastern Front. In the West, the United States entered the war after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The US and its allies launched a series of counterattacks, including the D-Day invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944. The Germans were pushed back on all fronts, and the prospect of a German victory grew increasingly unlikely. By 1944, Hitler's once formidable military had been decimated, and his war of conquest seemed doomed to fail. In his desperation, he turned to increasingly extreme measures, ordering scorched earth tactics that devastated much of Europe. But the collapse of the Nazi war machine was inevitable. As Allied forces advanced toward Berlin in early 1945, Hitler retreated to the Führer bunker, a fortified underground complex beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. Inside the bunker, Hitler's mental and physical health deteriorated rapidly. He was plagued by paranoia, delusions, and depression, compounded by the realization that Germany was on the brink of collapse. In the final days of the war, Hitler's leadership was reduced to issuing desperate orders that no longer had any practical effect. His generals, knowing that defeat was inevitable, ignored many of his commands. At the same time, Hitler's relationship with Eva Braun, who had been his companion for over a decade, remained one of the few constants in his final days. They had remained out of the public eye, and Braun had remained largely silent throughout his political rise. On April 29, 1945, in the midst of the crumbling Third Reich, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun were married in a brief private ceremony in the Führer bunker. The next day, April 30th, as Soviet forces closed in on the bunker, Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide. Hitler ingested cyanide and shot himself, while Eva took cyanide as well. After their deaths, their bodies were carried out of the bunker, doused in petrol and set on fire, in accordance with Hitler's instructions. The Soviets, who had captured Berlin, would eventually recover their remains, but the Führer of Nazi Germany was gone, and with him, the Nazi regime. Eva Braun's death, alongside Hitler's, marked the end of the Nazi regime. After years of loyalty to Hitler, she was finally able to escape the collapse of the Third Reich in the only way that seemed possible. While much of history focused on Hitler's rise and fall, Eva Braun's story was often overshadowed by the enormity of the crimes committed by the regime. Though she had spent much of her life in the shadows, never holding official power, Braun had been integral to Hitler's personal life. She had shared his final moments, choosing to be with him until the very end. After their suicides, the world learned the full extent of the horror that had been wrought by Hitler's policies, and his tragic death could not undo the devastation his ideology had caused. The aftermath of Hitler's death saw the total collapse of Nazi Germany. The war formally ended on May 8, 1945, with the unconditional surrender of the German military. Millions of lives had been lost, entire countries had been devastated, and the effects of World War II would be felt for generations. Hitler's legacy is one of destruction and suffering. His name is synonymous with genocide, totalitarianism, and unchecked power. The lessons learned from his rise to power, the dangers of extremist ideologies, the fragility of democratic institutions, and the moral imperative to resist hatred and bigotry remain as important today as they were in 1945. Hitler's life serves as a stark reminder that history can be shaped by individuals, but it is also a reminder of the responsibility we all have to stand against tyranny, oppression, and hatred wherever they may appear. Adolf Hitler's journey, from a failed artist to the architect of a regime that sought to dominate the world, culminated in the utter collapse of the Third Reich. His life story is not one of triumph, but of tragedy, a reminder of the destructive potential of unchecked ambition, hatred, and the exploitation of a nation's pain. As we reflect on the immense human suffering caused by his policies, the Holocaust and World War II, we must remember the millions who suffered at the hands of Nazi ideology. The world will never forget the lessons learned from Hitler's rise and fall, and it is incumbent upon each generation to ensure such darkness never comes again. If you enjoyed this update, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future news. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. God bless you.